Never has so much changed in a short period of time. I came home in one piece, a little wiser to the ways mankind can inflict harm on itself. I was whipsawed from seeing sanity and insanity played out in a very small arena of death on a daily basis for 1 year. I had to absorb the loss of a few good friends, in the name of preserving democracy and peace for the world. Was it worth it? Patrick Cosper.
The Vietnam War had many costs, not only for the soldiers involved, but also for the citizens of each country involved. Parents, siblings, spouses, children, and friends were all affected by the war through those they cared about who served. Every person was in some way personally marked by the war. This war and others in the 20th century began to show some of the mental stress that was put on soldiers that had long-term repercussions. It is easy for many to look at the Vietnam War and not be changed by what occurred, and to just see numbers. It is important to listen to the stories of all that happened, not only to learn from the past, but to also gain appreciation for those involved in the shaping of where we are now.
I was going to breakfast one morning, and I was hungry, and I looked up, and this Navy plane was bombing the devil out of a place maybe 200 or 300 yards from us. He'd come in there and he was dropping bombs, and look at me. I could see his eyes. I waved at him, and he waved at me and went straight back up. That is how the Air Force come in and drop those things. When a man can look you almost square in the eyes, and he's going so fast and he hits that thing, it goes straight up. It's a beautiful sight. Beautiful. Now,
Vietnam was split as a result of the Geneva Conference. The purpose of the Geneva Conference was to find a way to unify Vietnam and to restore peace in Indochina. Indochina was then split into Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. The Geneva Records temporarily split Vietnam into North and South zones. Under their government, North Vietnam became communist and South Vietnam became anti-communist. When an election to unify Vietnam was passed, the U.S. supported South Vietnam's refusal. This was part of the United States containment strategy, which was created to stop the spread of communism. The U.S. believed that if South Vietnam converted to communism, it would start a domino effect on other countries. President Kennedy sent American advisors, but the looming threat of the spread of communism still stood. Another concern was Viet Cong, a political organization and army in South Vietnam and Cambodia that fought the United States and South Vietnamese governments during the Vietnam War. Their mission was to overthrow the intentions of American imperialists and to make a peaceful unification of South and North Vietnam happen.
couldn't tell them apart. That's the reason we made certain that they didn't make any moves.
We'd come across villages where we'd take fire, and for the one or two people in there that might be BC, we'd level that village. Now militarily that might make sense, but you just stop and think for a few minutes what it means when, to get 2 people, you kill 150. Bob Moeller.
The soldiers in Vietnam over the course of their time there began to recognize when a person was Vietnamese. However, the Viet Cong would use citizens and normal townspeople as tools for their fight. This made it very difficult to know who the true enemy was. Were you supposed to protect the women and children, or were they going to hurt you? How was one to know whether or not the old lady pushing the cart actually needed help or was planted by the Viet Cong?
The Vietnamese people were just as sweet and thankful and pleasant as they could be. They were friendly, they were happy, they appreciated it.
The Gulf of Tonkin incident set off another spark to the fire. A sea battle involving the USS Maddox and North Vietnamese torpedo boats resulted in the death of 4 Vietnamese sailors and 6 wounded with no U.S. casualties. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution was soon to follow. Now President Lyndon B. Johnson was authorized to send troops into Southeast Asia. This was important because for the first time in history, the President did not need a formal declaration of war from Congress to use military force. Then came the Tet Offensive, the largest military campaign of the Vietnam War. It was launched by the Viet Cong in North Vietnam against South Vietnam, the United States, and all their allies. A wave of surprise attacks ensued military and civilian commands and control centers. On March 16, 1968, between 347 and 504 unarmed civilians in South Vietnam were killed. Shockingly, it was committed by the U.S. Army soldiers.
I was just one of those soldiers on the ground that had volunteered to be there, and I wasn't looking for anything to fuss about. You know, just because somebody wears a uniform doesn't mean they're bad. It means they're carrying out orders. Anything that I did goes right back to the commanding officer. I didn't have the power to make any decision.
Before, I never really asked, why are we in Vietnam? What's the history behind our involvement in that country? I went in. Boom. There's something you have to understand about a system like the military. Once you become a part of the machinery, it works on you. By the time it came for me to go overseas, I was a fanatic. I was the epitome of John Wayne. I wanted but one thing. I wanted to kill. Bob Moeller.
While 26 soldiers were charged with criminal offenses, only 2nd Lieutenant William Calley Jr. was convicted, serving a mere 3.5-year sentence under house arrest. This massacre was later called the most shocking episode of the Vietnam War. Global outrage followed, opposing America's involvement in the war. Back in the States, there was turmoil and racial tension, but on the front, all soldiers knew that the African American fighting by their side were fighting with them. Men who would be separated on U.S. soil were friends overseas.
Black man, as an executive officer, and he would come by and visit with me because we were both country. The number 2 man in the battalion. But how did I feel about this fellow looking me up? Wasn't that a great friendship? He come up and wanted somebody to talk to. I'm white, still white. He's still black. That a black man comes up and says, I want somebody to talk to me the way I would be talked to at home.
The involvement of American Indians proved beneficial as well. They could transmit messages in their own language, which had not yet been cracked by the Viet Cong.
I had a friend named Charging Elk and a friend named Running Horse. These were 2 Indians, and they was what I call men. I was a kid, coward kid. Running Horse, him and Charging Elk, they spoke Indian language, okay? And they went into the dangerous spots. And they talked to each other on the machines. And Charlie could not understand them to this day since World War II. The enemy has never broken the code of the Cherokees or the Indians that pass that stuff out.
In Vietnam, as in anywhere else, there were days when there would be lots to do and others where life would become mundane.
Gentlemen, welcome to Vietnam. You notice I didn't say ladies and gentlemen. Gentlemen, we got hit last night. When you debark, you need to start running. At Saigon. So when we got off, we run. We went and got a rifle. And we went on guard duty. In the same quarter hour that we got there. A lot of us. Now you think about how would you like to be in on an airplane for 2 days, you land, and they are blowing you up. They blew you up the last night, and they're afraid they're coming back tonight.
At last, the end of the war was marked by the fall of Saigon. Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, was taken over by North Vietnamese troops. A huge evacuation followed, including American soldiers and South Vietnamese citizens. The new communist rules led to a drastic decline in the population.
But Kennedy I'm glad he started it. I'm glad we finished it.